Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All praise is due to Allah, and Allah's blessings and peace and blessings be upon His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companion, all those who follow them in righteousness till the day of judgment. Welcome everybody to this talk on British Muslims in numbers. The purpose of this is just to give you a background about the demographics and the issues faced by the Muslim community within the UK. Now, everything I'm going to present today is based on cold, hard facts based off the 2011 census. So we'll be looking at a broad range of issues that concern the British Muslim community. So just to give you a little bit about myself. My name is Rahman. I am a finance professional, and I have to clarify, I'm not an academic expert in this field, though I do take an active interest in the issues related to British Muslims. So I've looked at a report that was produced last year by the Muslim Council of Britain to compile this presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to start, and I'll be using the PowerPoint slides to talk through the presentation. So I'll switch to the PowerPoint, and then we'll go through. There's a lot of material to cover because this report is quite detailed, but it will address a lot of the issues. And whenever you want to sort of address a problem or an issue, you've got to look at the cold hard facts to see what they paint a certain picture, and they tell you where things are at the moment. And if you want to improve anything, you've got to look at that, and then from there you've got to decide where you want to get to. So I'll switch now to the PowerPoint slides. So just a little bit about the Muslim Association of Britain. So it was founded in 1997. It is dedicated to serving a society by promoting the accepted understanding of mainstream Islam with its spiritual teachings, ideals, civil concepts, and moral values in a way that is directed towards serving humanity. MAB passionately believes Muslims should interact positively with all elements of wider British society to reflect, project, and convey the pure message of Islam, which unfortunately is not receiving a good press at the moment, largely off the back of the conduct of certain Muslim individuals themselves. So MAB's vision is Muslims at their best. So to move on, so this report was produced by the Muslim Council of Britain. So let me clarify who the Muslim Council of Britain is, so not to confuse with the Muslim Association of Britain. The Muslim Council of Britain is an umbrella organization, and it's a national representative Muslim organization with over 500 affiliates, which are based nationally, regionally, and also include local organizations, mosques, charities, and schools. And the Muslim Association of Britain is affiliated with the Muslim Council of Britain. And the Muslim Council of Britain were instrumental in lobbying for the census to ask about people's religious affiliation. Now, the first census to ask the question was in 2001, was in the 2001 census. And it's very fascinating to see the trends since 2001 to 2011. As I said, the MCB were instrumental in lobbying for the question on religious adherence. So moving on, so just to also stress that the question on religion was a voluntary question. People were not obliged to, or respondents were not obliged to answer that question. So you'll find that something like 92% of people in the 2011 census answered the question about religious affiliation, which means that roughly 8% didn't answer the question. And we can determine all sorts of things from that, and whether it was deliberately missed or whether people didn't want to state. But anyway, so what this report from the Muslim Council of Britain focuses on is basically a few areas and findings. So it will look at demographic details. So so population, place of birth, ethnic diversity, geographic distribution, age profile, issues relating to civic life like national identity, household type, focus on youth, homelessness, prison population, inequality, and then there's the issue of inequality, so deprivation, housing tenure, health and disability. and also labour market and education. So looking at focus on how many Muslims are working, what kind of qualifications Muslims have, and what's their socioeconomic classification. And then right at the end, I'll touch on some conclusions. But as I said, there's a lot of material to cover, and please bear with me. And there are a lot of tables and numbers. But hopefully the tables are quite simple. I've tried to keep it as simple as I can, and the tables are fairly explanatory. Then hopefully nothing too difficult. As I said, there's a lot of kind of numbers and things, but it's probably the best way to try to analyze the data. And I'll try to give some examples where I can to hopefully bring it all to life. So let's jump straight in, inshallah. So the first area we're going to look at in terms of the British Muslim population is to do with demographic detail. So, and the first area is the population relating to religious adherence. So according to the 2011 census, this is the number of religions in the UK. And as you can see, I've highlighted it. The Muslim population is about 5% as at 2011, or just under 3 million people. What's interesting is Christianity in the last 2001 census. I think something like 73% of people had answered that they were Christian, and in 10 years, that number has dropped to 59%. What that tells us is that UK is becoming an increasingly a post-Christian society, where religious adherence or affiliation to Christianity was stronger in the past, but you can also argue that in some senses cultural Christianity is still alive and well in this country, but often people may have forgotten the significance of certain celebrations, but if you scratch or you look deep enough, it's there, the heritage of Christianity within Britain. But it's a very sharp decline, but still a majority of the UK population, at least nominally, prescribes themselves as Christian. The Muslim population is the second largest faith. And what's interesting is that the Muslim population is larger than all the other non-Christian faiths put together. And a significant proportion of people had stated no religion. 25% of people say they do not have a religion, and 7% they did not answer the religion question. So just to summarize, over 2 million, well, the number's actually closer to about 3 million Muslims in 2011, and this is what this shows. Right, so if we say 2.7 million Muslims, interestingly, there is slightly more Muslim men than Muslim women, and you can draw all sorts of conclusions from that. Perhaps there may be more Muslim men, single Muslim men had immigrated to the British Isles, and hence causing that slight increase in number of about 100,000 over the Muslim women, but I don't have the detail on that one. I'm just speculating. Right. So this is another interesting table. So this is a country of birth of the Muslim population. Now, I've highlighted in red the square to do with the 2011 census. Now, 47% of Muslims are UK born, which hasn't changed much at all from the last census, which said 46%. So still, as at 2011, roughly half of the Muslim population was born in the UK, meaning the other half born overseas had emigrated to the UK. So in terms of a general observation, what can we make of that? So the increase in the Muslim population since the last census has prompted alarmist coverage in some sections of the media. So as you'll see, it was about 1.5, 1.6 million Muslims in 2001, and all of a sudden, fast forward 10 years, the Muslim community now is about 1.1 million, about 1.1 million times higher, and in the media there's been all sorts of kind of scare stories about Muslims taking over, Muslims expanding and vastly in Britain. And also, this is a trend that's seen in lots of parts of Western Europe and in America as well. But still, when you put this in perspective, Muslims are still less than 1 in 20 of the overall population. So demographic alarmism is scaremongering. So let me just slightly reduce this, try to fit it in. So this is an interesting one. So this is looking at the ethnicity of the Muslim population. So what is interesting about Britain that you're not going to get in any other, pretty much in any other Muslim majority country, is that I would say this is a very unique and fantastic thing about Britain, is that the Muslim community here is so diverse. You are likely to interact with Muslims from all across the world, from different ethnicities and backgrounds, in a way that you just wouldn't in any other Muslim majority country. And with that, you're going to see different practices of Islam, different interpretations, different madhabs, all kinds of things, and it's all present in Britain. And whereas if you are based in, say, Turkey or Pakistan, the Islam practice there will tend to be slightly more homogenous than the kind of the variety you see in Britain. But at the same time, let's just dig into these numbers here. So the single largest ethnic Muslim community is the Pakistani community. Roughly 38% of Muslims of all Muslims in Britain are from a Pakistani heritage. If you were to add up all the Asian people from a subcontinent background, basically 2/3 of Muslims in Britain are from the subcontinent background. Another interesting development is the rapid rise of the Arab population, or the number of people describing themselves as Arab Muslims in the census. So roughly there's just under, in 2011, there's just under 200,000 Arabs in the UK. And if you in the 2001 census, it's not that they just suddenly appeared in the last 10 years, because there isn't any data for them. It's just that they were kind of lumped in with Asian or other, but this time there's a separate category for them, and it's just under 200,000 now are Arab. Also, in terms of the African Black African community, there's been a big rise. So roughly 8%, 10% of the Muslim population is from what you call a Black Caribbean, Black African, or other Black background. I would imagine a large proportion of the Black African rise is probably due to a large influx of Somali Muslims, as well as in some other parts of, so maybe Sudanese, maybe from Nigeria, other parts of Africa as well. And another interesting observation is the white category. Now, 8% of all of the British Muslims described themselves as white. However, white British Muslims are about 3% of all the Muslims, or 77,000. So if you were to put that in perspective, that would, I'll just give you an example here. 77,000 will just about fill up Old Trafford, Manchester United football ground. So if you think about the time that Islam's been in Britain, which is probably since the 50s and 60s, that's not a very large number, to be honest with you. So what it suggests is that the rise of Islam, at least in Britain, is largely due to birth rates and immigration, and less so in terms of conversion. So here is another. This is Muslim proportion of ethnic groups. I've kind of touched on a lot of this already. So this is so as I said, about 2/3. So this is another diagram here. So it shows the ethnic diversity of Muslims in the UK. Right. So in terms of this diagram, this is a. I just wanted to expand a little bit on this one. See if I can. Right, so if you look at the absolute numbers of Muslims, basically just over 2/3 of Muslims live in just 4 regions, which is London, West Midlands, the Northwest, and Yorkshire and Yorkshire and the Humber. So and mostly this is in kind of like inner city conurbations. And according to the census, Muslims are about 12.5% of London's population. I think latest estimates now, as at 2016, put the number closer to 15%. So there are 35 local authority districts with a Muslim population of 10% or more. And there are about 70 wards with a Muslim population of 40% or more. So, for instance, the Muslim population of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets has increased from 71,000 in 2001 to 88,000 in 2011, which is by 19%. And so between the 2001 and 2011 census, the number of Muslims increase in London has been 35%. So London's had a 35% increase in its Muslim population in 10 years. So what do we draw from this? So we can say that Muslims are part of the social fabric of Britain. But you can find Muslims all across the country, in every county, and I'll show you a map in a little bit, which shows the concentration of Muslims in London as well as in Britain. So this diagram also shows Muslim population change in cities with large Muslim populations. So again, the cities with the kind of the highest concentration of Muslims are like London, 12.5%. Birmingham, 22% of Birmingham is Muslim. Bradford, 25%. To be honest, I always thought Bradford was more than 25%. Manchester, 16%. Now, in terms of, so this is an interesting graph which shows the overall population and Muslim population age profile. So the age profile is categorized from 0 to 4, 5 to 15, 16 to 24, 25 to 64, and 65 and over. And what it shows is that 33% of the Muslim population was aged 15 years or under in 2011, compared to 19% of the population as a whole. And only 4% of the Muslim population is 65 years and older, compared to 16% of the overall population. So the Muslim population has a younger demographic, and the number of older people from within the Muslim community is less than the population at large. And in a decade from now, there'll be approximately 190,000 Muslims in the 65 to 84-year-old age band. So with time, eventually Muslims will move into the higher age bracket, but still the profile of Muslims at the moment is they're a younger population. So the median age of the Muslim population is 25 years, compared to the overall population of 40 years. Now, when you think about aging and who's going to pay the pensions, and obviously a younger workforce is vital for people who are going to pay the taxes, who are going to support pensioners in older age. So in some ways, a younger population from within the Muslim community can be an asset for Britain. So I'll just skip this slide. I think I've touched on most of. So just to summarize, in terms of age profile, so 33% of Muslims are under the age of 15, which is a very high figure. 4% are age 65 and over, so that's very low. Now, interesting as well is 8.1% of all school-age children are Muslim. So that is higher than the sort of 4.8% as Muslims as a whole. So as the years roll by, it basically will mean that Muslims will be a higher proportion of the British population going forward than the current 4.8%. Where it will plateau, where it will level off, it's hard to say. At the moment, as things stand, it could plateau about 10 to 15%, maybe in about sort of 20 or so years. But again, it's still very early days. Right. So now, so there are 26 parliamentary constituencies with significant or 20% or more Muslim population. So what this means is that I think in I'm not sure in England, because this census is mainly for England and Wales. There's over 500 or so constituencies. Now, with 26 constituencies having a 20% or more Muslim population in them, with the highest being Birmingham Hodge Hill, Bradford West, over 50%. Then you have Birmingham Hall Green, East Ham, Bradford East, Blackburn. Then in these sort of regions, the Muslim vote is very significant. It can swing the vote to a particular political party. So there is some useful observations here in terms of Muslim civic engagement in the future. Now, so this is sorry, just let me reduce this slightly. So this is a map of London here, and it shows where the concentration of Muslim settlement is within London. Now, the white areas are kind of with low Muslim population, and the heavily green areas are areas with high Muslim concentration within London. Remember, during the time of the census, about 12.5% of London was Muslim. But again, if you look at it in detail, you see that Muslims are concentrated in certain parts. So, for instance, in the east of London, you're looking, there's a heavy concentration in the sort of just east of London, where you see the dark green there. And these areas like Ilford, Whitechapel, Bethnal Green, Tower Hamlets, and on the west side of London, you've got areas like Wembley and Harrow, and South London is not, there is noticeably kind of less concentration of Muslims. There's a speck of green in the south of London, and we're looking at areas like Tooting and towards the west of London, you're looking at areas I assume like Hounslow and other areas in that vicinity. So this is kind of where the distribution of where the Muslims are in London. Now, on the next map, I'm going to show you one of England and Wales. Remember what we said before? We said the concentration of Muslims in the UK is mainly in four areas. So we're talking London, Birmingham, around Manchester, northwest area, and Yorkshire. So if you look at this map, so in the south you can see the heavy concentration of Muslims in and around London, and then just sort of to the west of London there's green. I mean, I would imagine that would be Slough, and just north of London there's a big blob of green that will be Luton, and just in the centre you've got Birmingham and probably Leicester just to its right, and in the north you've got areas like in and around Manchester, that you've got areas like Blackburn, Preston, Bradford. So these are the kind of areas where where 76% of the Muslim population is settled. So it is a very inner city population, and so you're not likely to find many Muslims in rural Oxfordshire. I mean, for instance, I often go and do some school talks at local primary schools about Islam in in rural Oxfordshire, and I go to so many schools in Oxfordshire, and there isn't a single Muslim in them. Um, and there are still large parts of the UK where there aren't any Muslims in them, despite them being about roughly 5% of the population, because Muslims, as shown in the census, have concentrated in a few areas. So right, so I'm going to next talk about issues relating to civic life. So according to the census, let me zoom in, just bear with me a second. So this is Muslims and national identity, and obviously I'm talking about British Muslims. So I suppose what's encouraging for Muslims playing a more active role in UK society is that 73% of them stated British as their only identity, which means that if you extrapolate that and you think it through, it means that Muslims by and large are loyal to Britain and see themselves as British. And often some of the polling has shown that Muslims, in fact, show more loyalty to Britain than non-Muslim British people in the UK, which flies in the face of all the kind of scaremongering you see in the media about this issue. So I'll move on to the next topic. Okay, so we're looking here at language proficiency. So so if you use, so this is using ethnicity as a kind of proxy. So there is a high level of English language competence amongst Muslims, and even amongst in this example, Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. Those struggling with speaking English comprise approximately 6% of the Muslim population. So 6% of the overall Muslim population struggle with English. So we're talking again about a small number here, but obviously in the media, we've had a very topical issue recently with David Cameron jumping on this issue, probably largely to appease his support base. To show them that he's getting tough with Muslims, rather than sort of worrying about the welfare of Muslim women in general, about them having to learn to speak English. The numbers we're talking about really are quite low, and I think as we move on in the next decade, that number will dwindle away, and it'll be a complete non-issue. But but if you were to listen to the media coverage on this, you'd be forgiven in sort of thinking that something like half the Muslim population can't speak English in Britain. But the reality is not the case at all. We're talking about very small numbers. Right. Okay. Just let me zoom out. Bear with me a sec. Try to show as much of this. Right. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the household type. So there are about 260,000 Muslim married households with dependent children. So so there's about 35. Sorry. Let me start again. Muslim married households with dependent children makes up 30. Okay, I think I'm back now. Sorry about that. I lost the connection. So I'll resume back to where I got to. So bear with me a second. Okay. So coming back to this slide about Muslims and household composition. What I found interesting as well is that there is a very high proportion of Muslims as lone parents with dependent children compared to the population as a whole. So we're talking about 11% or 10.4% of Muslim households compared to 7% of the population as a whole. So it is quite an interesting thing, and it's probably something that caught me by surprise, and I assumed that Muslims would do quite well on this one, but obviously not. And maybe there's which might suggest that issues of divorce and family breakdown are higher than people than a lot of Muslims assume within the Muslim community, because on this front Muslims are doing worse than the population as a whole. So I've got very limited time, so I'll try to finish what I've got left in about sort of 10 minutes. So I think I mentioned this before. While Muslims form 4.8% of the population overall, 8.1% of all school-aged children from the 5 to 15 age band are Muslim, and so the Muslim community is a very youthful population. Now, in terms of the homeless population, Muslims tend to do worse than the average as a whole. So while 2.2% of the overall population are in hostels or temporary shelters, for the homeless, this is 5.1% within the Muslim population. And now, if we move on to prisons, so this is the prison population. What it shows is that Muslims are 13.1% of the prison population is Muslim, and I understand that this percentage is rising fast as well. So Muslims being about 5% of the population make up over 13% of the prison population, which means that we are over 2.5 times represented in the prison population than our actual numbers suggest. There are a lot of complex issues relating to that, and more research needs to be looked at that. But also, what's interesting is that I think I heard something like, although I don't necessarily have data to back this, but a lot of the white British converts to Islam are through interaction with other Muslim prisoners. So that's an interesting observation. So again, I'll move on quickly. Now, looking at issues of inequalities. Okay, so Muslims and deprivation by local authority districts. Now, 46% or 1.22 million of the Muslim population resides in the 10% most deprived areas, and 1.7% in the least deprived. So basically, only 1.7%, or say 2% of the Muslim population live in the best areas, and 46% of the Muslims live in the most deprived areas. Again, you can draw all kinds of conclusions from this. So for instance, of the 17 or so I picked out of the most deprived areas, say Liverpool it has the highest area that's deprived index. The Muslim population is quite low in Liverpool compared to the national average of 3.3%. And if you take out Knowsley, Blackpool, and Hull, then you'll find that in all of the most deprived areas, Muslims are very healthily represented, which again is an unwelcome statistic, but that can also help give clues as to, for instance, if there is underachievement in certain areas. If these areas have very high concentrations of Muslims in them, then it could help sort of help us analyze why these things are happening. Now, coming to the issue of home ownership, 28% of Muslim households live in social housing. So this is the highest amongst Muslims. Sorry, I'll start again. 28% of Muslims live in social housing. So that is higher than the population as a whole, which is not a good thing. Because so if you add the social rented from council, social rented, other social rented, there could be all sorts of reasons for this. Perhaps Muslims, from a religious observation perspective, are reluctant to take mortgages and things out because they may have reservations about that. But again, as a community, if we want to move on in the world, we shouldn't have to sort of rely on social housing. It's a good way to gauge kind of at what level Muslims are at, if many of them are reliant on social housing. And the census reveals that the highest ethnicity from amongst the Muslims that relies on social housing is the Bangladeshi heritage ethnic category. Not that I want to name and shame, but it was just an observation. So I'll move on quickly. We're running out of time. Okay, so on the issue of health, Muslims tend to do better than the overall population as a whole when it comes to very good or good health. And one thing I think the reason why that is because, again, we mentioned this many times, the Muslim community is from a lower age profile, and so are likely to be in good health. If you're younger, you're likely to have less health issues. But then the story kind of changes after that. So the percentage within the Muslim population with self-declared bad or very bad health for all age groups is 5.5%, which is similar to the overall population in this category of 5.4%. However, of the age group of 50 years and above, it is 24.1% for Muslims, which is double the percentage for the population as a whole, which is 12.1%. What it suggests is that the only thing that's saving the Muslims in this percentage terms is the young profile. But as Muslims get over 50, the ratio of bad health so to rephrase this, the average Muslim over 50 is twice as likely to have poor health than the population at large. You can look at that and think, why is that happening? Could that be poor diet, less exercise in the population? There could be all sorts of reasons, but these are issues that to be highlighted. And other issue is Muslims and disability. So another interesting finding, I'm just trying to pick out interesting findings here. There are about 50 local authority districts where 40% or more of Muslim women over 65 years of age are in bad health. So that's an interesting finding, and it's way more than the national average. So it seems that Muslims, as they get older, their health deteriorates much faster than the population at large. That's an issue for Muslims to think about and try to tackle and address. So labor market and education. I'll have to move very quickly because I'm running out of time. So about 20% of the Muslim population is in full-time employment compared to 35% of the overall population. So being a Muslim means you're less likely to be in full-time employment. And 7.2% of Muslims are unemployed compared to 4% in the overall population. So that, again, nearly double the Muslim population is unemployed compared to the overall population. And coming back to education and qualifications, so there's been some good progress in terms of education. In that there's been a reduction in the percentage of Muslims with no qualifications from 2001 to 2011, from 39% to 26%. So that's progress in the. It's very welcome, and it's going in the right direction. So Muslim communities in 2011 are comparatively better educated than in 2001. I suppose that fits with the trend of migration, settling in and acclimatizing to the new society, and then with time you begin to settle and your situation begins to improve. Now, so coming to the socioeconomic classification. So the proportion of Muslims in the higher professional occupation category is 5.5%, which is comparable to the overall population of 7.6%. There's a greater comparability in the small employers and own account workers category, 9.7% in the Muslim population and 9.3% in the overall population. But then again, there are a number of London boroughs where the population of Muslims in the higher managerial, administrative and professional occupations category exceeds the number in the never worked and long-term unemployed categories. So if you look at the never worked and long-term unemployed in the Muslim community, where it's 21% never worked compared to 4% never worked in the population at large. These trends show up starkly in the census. I'm going to conclude right now, and then maybe we'll leave some time for a few questions at the very end. So in conclusion, so let me. So these are the few bullet points. These are the few takeaways. So the Muslim population in England and Wales has increased significantly since 2001 as a result of various factors. Almost half of this population is born in the UK. The age profile is skewed towards the young, with a higher than national average young population. British Muslims are an ethnically diverse group of people, with only some having problems speaking English. I should stress some. Muslims are present in all regions of England and Wales, but London has the highest population of Muslims. Despite more than half of them being born outside the UK, a high number choose their national identity as British. Next page. Let's reduce this in size. Hopefully you can see that. So how have Muslims moved forward since 2001? The latest census indicates that a section of the Muslim population is prospering and making progress, as evident by representation in the higher socioeconomic class and signs of social mobility. Muslims are also more educated than a decade ago, which is very welcome. Many Muslims are small employers or self-employed. Research indicates that Black minority ethnic population is becoming less residentially segregated. The composition of Muslim households is mostly of married couples with dependent children, but there are also a surprisingly high number of lone parent families with dependent children and also one-person households. The self-reported health of British Muslims is similar to that of the overall population, except for the older age group of Muslims, where health deteriorates more markedly. There are similar trends in the case of self-declared disability. And to absolutely conclude, so notwithstanding pockets of prosperity, there is a higher rate of unemployment and economic inactivity in the Muslim population compared to the overall population. A greater proportion of Muslim women are not in the labor market and look after the home or family. That's not necessarily a bad thing for certain Muslims. I know and I know this sort of thing is very valued within the Muslim community. Anyway, almost half of the Muslim population lives in the most deprived areas. Again, as an issue we touched on. This has increased since 2001 for two possible reasons. The Muslim population in the known areas of deprivation has increased. So basically, they've had more kids, and more people have moved into these areas. And the increase in deprived neighborhoods for or it could be down to the increase in deprived neighborhoods as for the nation as a whole. I mean, one theory is that Muslims like to they want to have access to their halal meat, and also want to be within close vicinity to mosques. And people also like to often live or congregate or live in areas where people who look and sound like them are in closer proximity. That could be one of the reasons. The data also reveals the high percentage of Muslim households that rely on social housing. The number of Muslims in prison is a cause for concern. We mentioned before, Muslims unfortunately are very well overly represented in the prison system. So, to summarize, final thing, the overall picture is of a faith community that is growing in size with an ethnic and socio-economic diversity that is a microcosm of the changes in society at large. The younger age profile, overseas connections, and entrepreneurial inclinations can all be strategic strengths for Britain as a whole. So I'll end my presentation here. Sorry, we've had to just kind of rush through it towards the end, and we'll see if you can take any questions. Not that as I would like to. Bear with me a second. Can you see me now? Okay, so if there are any questions, as I said, I'm no expert in this area, but I'd like to think I'm slightly well informed on some of these issues. Yeah. So says basically, Abdullah says basically all Tower Hamlets. That's not true, actually. Officially, Tower Hamlets is less than 50% Muslims. Though I think it's because the younger demographic is primarily Muslim. So if for some, especially when it comes to school age, it looks like the schools in Tower Hamlets are overwhelmingly Muslim. That as we said, could be consistent with a lower age profile. Yes, I should stress that I've picked this off from the census report that was done by the Muslim Council of Britain, which is very helpful, and it's an excellent resource for people wanting to work in this area, trying to understand the problems that Muslims face, because there are lots of issues that need to be addressed here in Britain. A lot of work needs to be done to move the community forward, inshallah. But one thing I should stress is that we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves as well in Britain, in that the Muslim community, compared to the rest of Europe, does really well in Britain. I mean, there's some really good things, and there's some really good legislation here in Britain that helps Muslims well, basically, Muslims in Britain are, if you compare them, say, to France, Belgium, and in Germany or Italy, they're light years ahead in terms of progress. I would, in terms of in terms of integration with society, by and large. I mean, probably the only place where in the Western world where Muslims do better than in Britain is probably the United States, where Muslims are generally very well integrated. The Muslims there are in the higher professional categories, and most of them arrived as doctors, engineers, lawyers, and they're already third generation in the US. And whereas in Britain, a lot of the Muslims who arrived didn't have necessarily an education or a degree. Some of them came to work in the mills. That's not the case in the US. Many of them came educated, despite what you might see in the press in the US. I know Muslims at the moment with this whole Donald Trump thing and are getting a hard time there, but that's because certain elements of the press are allowed to run riots in the US in a way that is not necessarily permitted in Britain. But generally, at least on a Europe scale, Muslims in Britain are doing rather well. But can we do more? Absolutely. There's so much more that needs to be done in issues of we talked about the crime, prison system, education. Let's see, employment opportunities, that kind of thing. I can send the slides to everybody, but you may as well just download the report. We can send a link out to everybody with regards to the where you can get this data from. Someone goes, "Well done, we are outstanding even in prisons." Okay, is there any questions? Okay, so at the beginning we did a poll, and we said which one strategy will be the most effective in improving the standard or improving the standing of British Muslims in the next 10 years that should be focused on. So fast forwarding on 10 years from the 2011 census, the next census will be in 2021. I reckon it will show another large increase in the Muslim population. Especially there's been more of an influx in Muslims entering Western Europe in general, but also in Britain. So in terms of which of the polling, so we said the one that came out the most is education and academic attainment. And to be honest, that's kind of what I expected. If you focus on education and academic attainment, often that tends to result in lots of other things and lots of other metrics improving with that. I'm not surprised. Tackling extremism, I think, was low on the agenda because I think the number of extremists within the Muslim community is really tiny, but they get all the airwaves and all the news reporting focuses on this one issue, but it's not the biggest issue that's affecting the Muslim community. There's a whole range of issues as shown in this presentation, and more civic engagement, that's very important. I read something interesting about the law of weak ties, which basically says you don't have to be best buddies with or friends with people from different backgrounds. All that's relevant and sufficient enough is that you engage in a civic space with them. So it could be joining political parties, it could be joining a national heritage club or something. As long as they see Muslims and interact with Muslims, it's very difficult to stereotype someone as the press does, or as to say this is what a Muslim thinks, because their experience of having interacted with a Muslim flies in the face of what's being presented to them as a Muslim. So Muslims should get out there more and be more involved in local projects. Just see if there's any more questions I haven't addressed. So he goes, how many Muslims are there in Scotland? What proportion of the population are they? Okay. I think I have the answer to this one. Bear with me a second. What population? I think I read it was something like 77,000. It's far less than it is in England and Wales. I think it's something like 1.5 or 2%. But there is less Muslims in Scotland, definitely. And Muslims in Scotland kind of are in the sort of large cities like Glasgow, Dundee, Edinburgh. Kind of, so he goes, what percentage of Muslims are in London? We as at the 2011 census was 12.5%, but I think that is getting creeping up closer to 15%, and I think that's probably what it would be when the next census comes around. Okay, I'm running out of time now. I've got literally 1 minute left. Just trying to see if there's any more questions. Okay, I think that's it now. Jazakumullah khair everyone for tuning in, and inshallah I will send the slides out, but also we will also send out the links to where you can get this report from the Muslim Council of Britain. It's very informative, and it lays out the issues that need to be tackled in a way that's just very, very helpful to everybody. And again, it throws out a few surprises. It's not all negative. There's some very positive developments in there, but at the same time, there's some real issues that need to be addressed soon, inshallah. Okay, take care, inshallah. Till the next MABinar. Assalamu alaikum.